I knew something was off the moment Tyler Brooks walked in wearing a crushed velvet blazer and shoes that looked like he'd stolen them from a tech conference. His handshake was damp. His smile was the kind you see on guys selling you extended warranties. And his first sentence to me, before even finding the bathroom, was, "So what exactly do you do here that adds value?" 20 years in risk and compliance, 8 years before that in the Marines. I've seen plenty of red flags in my time. In Fallujah, there was this contractor who always had too much cash, too many excuses, and too little paperwork. Guy turned out to be selling our supply routes to insurgents. Same gut feeling hit me watching Tyler fidget with his phone while I explained our vendor approval process. Tyler was different from the usual corporate climbers. Not because he was some criminal mastermind. That would have required actual planning. Tyler was a storm of Silicon Valley buzzwords trapped in a guy who thought spreadsheets were beneath him. I'm Jake Sullivan, by the way. 47 years old, been keeping companies honest since before Tyler could spell disruption. 2 tours in Iraq taught me how to spot trouble. 20 years in corporate America taught me how to document it properly. When my old boss Henry retired, I figured we'd get someone with experience. Someone who understood that compliance isn't about stopping progress. It's about making sure progress doesn't land everyone in federal prison. What I didn't expect was a 32-year-old Stanford MBA whose entire understanding of risk management could fit on a sticky note. Our company, Meridian Financial Services, handled investment portfolios for mid-size corporations. Not sexy work, but steady. The kind of place where doing things right mattered more than doing them fast. At least until Tyler showed up. By week 2, Tyler had streamlined 3 internal policies, which meant he deleted them and called it innovation. He kept using words like agile governance and legacy thinking, usually while waving his hands around like he was conducting an invisible orchestra. The guy had spent 3 years at Tesla and 2 at Airbnb, which apparently made him an expert on everything except the industry we actually worked in. The first real warning sign came during our weekly finance meeting. I'd flagged a vendor invoice that jumped from $40,000 to $220,000 in a single quarter. No corresponding change in scope. No additional services documented. Just a number that had grown by 500% overnight. "Jake, we need to move past this legacy thinking," Tyler interrupted me mid-sentence. "These micro-audits slow down our velocity." Velocity. In a compliance review. I just stared at him. "It's a significant increase without documentation," I said. "Protocol requires I'm sunsetting that protocol." He grinned like he'd just solved world hunger. Part of our new streamlined approval framework. That reminded me of another guy from Iraq. Lieutenant Fresh out of West Point. Thought the rules of engagement were suggestions. Lasted about 3 weeks before his own men requested a transfer. Same energy, same dangerous confidence. But here's the thing about being called outdated in corporate America when you're pushing 50. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I was being too rigid. Maybe Tyler's fresh perspective was exactly what the company needed. Maybe a guy who'd never spent a day in the trenches actually knew something I didn't. So I kept my mouth shut and did what I always do. I documented everything. The home situation wasn't helping my stress levels. Lisa and I were having dinner last Tuesday talking about college costs. Amy, our 19-year-old, was home for spring break from NYU. "Dad, the study abroad program in London costs an extra $15,000, she said, picking at her salad. "But it's only offered junior year, so if I don't do it now..." Lisa caught my eye across the table. We both knew the math. Amy's current tuition was $52,000 a year. Ryan, our 17-year-old, was looking at colleges that cost even more. He wanted to study engineering at MIT or Stanford. Great kid, brilliant student, but those schools don't offer family discounts. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart," Lisa said. She teaches high school math, so she's good at making numbers work. But even she looked worried. Ryan looked up from his phone. "Maybe I should look at state schools instead." "You apply wherever you want," I told him. "Don't limit yourself because of money." But privately, I was doing the calculations. We had $37,000 in savings. Lisa's teacher salary covered the mortgage and groceries. My income covered everything else, including the college fund that kept shrinking faster than we could fill it. After the kids went upstairs, Lisa cornered me in the kitchen. "You've been distracted lately. What's going on at work?" I told her about Tyler, about the policy changes, about getting sidelined from important projects. She listened with that teacher face she gets when dealing with problem administrators. "Sounds like you're dealing with someone who thinks experience is a liability," she said. "Maybe it is. Maybe I'm just too set in my ways to see innovation when it's staring me at." "Jake," she put her hand on my arm. "I've seen innovation. I've also seen incompetence disguised as innovation. Trust your instincts. The next morning, I was working late, catching up on quarterly reviews that Tyler had somehow reassigned to legacy priority status. The office was empty, except for the cleaning crew and the hum of servers. I was digging through archived vendor files when I found something that made my blood run cold. Single invoice from a new IT vendor. Dated April 3rd, but the vendor wasn't approved until April 17th. The line items were split into 2 charges. Same deliverable, same week. Total $149,750. Split just below our $150,000 auto-escalation threshold. That's a trick insurgents used to use in Iraq. Split payments to avoid triggering automatic security reviews. Stay just under the radar threshold. I cross-referenced it with project logs. No record of the service. Checked the approval chain. Nothing, just one line. Approved TB. Tyler Brooks. I sat there staring at the screen for a long time. In the Marines, this is the moment when you realize your intel was wrong and you're walking into an ambush. In corporate America, it's when you realize your new boss isn't just incompetent. He might be stealing. The next morning, I came in early, pulled up that invoice again, and started building what I call an intelligence file. In the Marines, when you suspect enemy activity, you don't just report a gut feeling. You gather evidence, establish patterns, create a timeline. Same principle applies when your boss might be robbing the company blind. What I found over the next week made my stomach turn. Tyler hadn't just approved one questionable invoice. There were 7 of them, all from newer vendors he'd personally fast-tracked. All had been logged after the services were supposedly delivered. Some were input weeks after the service date. The real kicker? Every single one had been logged from Tyler's account between midnight and 3 a.m. In Iraq, we learned that criminals do their dirty work in the dark. Corporate criminals apparently follow the same playbook. I almost got caught digging through the files on Thursday night. Tyler came back to the office around 9 p.m., which was unusual since he usually disappeared by 5 to hit whatever trendy workout class was popular that week. I heard his keycard beep and quickly minimized my screens, pulled up a routine compliance report. "Working late, Jake." He appeared in my doorway, gym bag in hand. "Quarterly reviews," I said, not looking up. "You know how it is." "Actually, I don't." That's exactly the kind of inefficiency we're trying to eliminate. He stood there for another 30 seconds like he was trying to decide if I was worth investigating. Finally walked away. I waited 10 minutes before opening the vendor files again. The next day I tried approaching Tyler directly, thinking maybe there was some explanation I was missing. Caught him between meetings, asked about the late night approvals. "Jake, you're creating problems to solve them," he said without even looking up from his phone. This is exactly the kind of legacy thinking that slows down innovation. We need to trust our partners, not interrogate them. That's when Tyler started his retaliation campaign. First, he pulled me off 2 cross-functional vendor projects I'd been leading for years. No explanation, no discussion. One morning I logged in and my access was gone, files archived, project channels dead. When I asked about it, he just smiled. "We're reallocating resources to better align with strategic priorities," he said. "Don't worry, I've got something perfect for your skill set." My new assignment was something called Legacy Risk Archive Optimization. Translation: sitting in a back office going through old SharePoint folders and flagging expired contracts nobody cared about. I was effectively benched, pushed aside like outdated equipment they couldn't quite throw away yet. But I had an ally. Tom Rodriguez had been with the company for 15 years, worked his way up from accounts payable to assistant controller. More importantly, he was the guy who actually processed vendor payments, which meant he saw everything that came through the system. "Jake, something's weird with these new vendors," he told me during lunch one day. "Half of them have addresses that don't match their incorporation states. One company's supposedly in Delaware, but the payment goes to a P.O. box in Nevada." "You mentioned this to Tyler?" "Once. He told me not to worry about it. That vendor verification was legacy thinking." Tom made air quotes. "But Jake, I've been doing this for 15 years. These payments don't smell right." The isolation at work was getting worse. Procurement stopped copying me on purchase discussions. Finance started closing invoices without routing them through risk review. Even my badge stopped opening certain conference rooms where Tyler held his leadership huddles. At home, the pressure was building too. Lisa was grading papers at the kitchen table when I got home one night, red pen moving across student worksheets like a surgeon's scalpel. "Rough day?" I asked. "Principal wants us to implement a new grading system without any training." "Sound familiar?" She looked up from a paper covered in algebraic equations. "You know what I tell my students when they want to skip steps in problem solving?" "What?" "That shortcuts in math lead to wrong answers." Same principle applies everywhere else. She set down her pen. Jake, I've been thinking about our conversation. This Tyler situation. You've been dealing with problem administrators your whole career. First in the military, then in corporate. You've never backed down before. This is different. We've got college bills coming, the mortgage, your mother's medical expenses. I can't afford to be unemployed right now. We can't afford for you to compromise your integrity either. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. I've seen what happens to teachers who stay quiet when administrators cut corners. It never ends well. That weekend, Amy came home from NYU for a long weekend. Over dinner, she was telling us about her finance classes. Professor says the biggest corporate scandals usually start small, she said, twirling pasta around her fork. One person sees something wrong, doesn't report it, then it gets bigger and bigger until it explodes. Smart professor, Lisa said, giving me a meaningful look. Dad, you work in compliance, right? Do you ever catch people doing bad stuff? I thought about Tyler's midnight approvals, the phantom vendors, the split invoices designed to avoid oversight. Sometimes, what do you do when you catch them? You report it, even when it's scary, even when it might cost you something. Ryan looked up from his phone. What if reporting it cost you your job? I looked around the table at my family. 3 people depending on my income, my decisions, my courage. Then you hope you've raised kids smart enough to understand why you did it. Monday morning, Tyler unveiled his latest innovation, eliminating our monthly vendor review meetings entirely. We're moving to an exception-based model, he announced to the leadership team. Only flag issues when they exceed our tolerance thresholds. The tolerance thresholds, of course, were set so high that nothing would ever get flagged. A vendor could bill us for a lunar vacation and it wouldn't trigger review. After the meeting, Tyler called me into his office. First time he'd spoken to me directly in 2 weeks. Jake, I've been thinking about your career trajectory here. He leaned back in his ergonomic chair like he was doing me a favor. Maybe it's time to consider some alternatives. Early retirement package, consulting arrangement, something that recognizes your years of service while allowing the organization to evolve. There it was, the polite corporate version of resign or be fired. I'm not ready to retire, Tyler. Well, think about it over the weekend. These kinds of opportunities don't come along often, especially for people with your experience level. I went home that night and told Lisa everything. About the report I was building, about Tyler's threat, about the choice I was facing. She listened without interrupting, which is what she does when she's processing something serious. How bad could this get? She asked. If I'm wrong, I lose my job, probably get blacklisted in the industry, and we're looking at financial disaster right when the kids need us most. And if you're right, Tyler goes to prison, the company avoids a massive scandal, and maybe I keep my job. She was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at me with that expression she gets when she's about to say something I need to hear. You know what I tell my students when they're afraid to do the right thing because it might cost them something? What? I tell them that the cost of doing the wrong thing is always higher in the long run. The next morning, I opened my computer and started writing my report. Time to launch Operation Cleanhouse. Writing that report felt like loading ammunition. Every line item, every timestamp, every forged signature was another round in the chamber. I'd learned in Iraq that when you're building a case against the enemy, you better make sure your intel is bulletproof. One mistake, one loose end, and suddenly you're the one under investigation. I spent 3 days putting together a document that would make a military briefing officer proud. Clean timeline, supporting evidence, financial impact analysis. No opinions, no speculation, just facts and numbers. Total exposure, $40.3 million in questionable vendor payments. All approved by Tyler Brooks, all outside normal procedures. The hardest part was deciding who to send it to. Tyler had made it clear I wasn't part of the decision-making process anymore. Going through him would be like asking a thief to investigate his own robbery. But going around him meant crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I was sitting in my office at 7:30 on a Wednesday morning, staring at an email draft addressed to Rebecca Walsh, our corporate compliance director. Subject line, pattern of vendor approval irregularities, immediate review requested. The report was attached. My finger hovered over the send button. Then my desk phone rang. Internal call, Jake, it's Tom from accounting. You need to see something. Conference room C now. I found Tom hunched over his laptop, looking like he'd seen a ghost. Jake, remember that vendor in Nevada I mentioned? I just ran a payment trace. Look at this. He pulled up a bank routing screen. The payment for that $149,000 invoice? It hadn't gone to any business account. It had been deposited into a personal checking account registered to a T. Brooks, Jesus, I whispered. It gets worse. I found 2 more just like it. Different vendors, same account. Jake, this isn't sloppy bookkeeping. This is straight up theft. That's when I hit send on my email to Rebecca. She called me 2 hours later. Her voice was calm, professional, but I could hear something underneath it. Steele. Jake, I've reviewed your submission along with some additional information that's come to light. Can you be available for a call at 3 p.m. today? Of course. And Jake? Keep this between us for now. We're dealing with a federal matter. Federal. That word hit me like a cold slap. This wasn't about corporate policy violations anymore. This was about criminal fraud. The call lasted 40 minutes. Rebecca went through my report line by line, then shared what her own investigation had uncovered. The fake vendors, the personal accounts, the systematic theft that had been going on for months. This triggers an immediate federal audit, she said finally. FBI Financial Crimes Unit, surprise deployment. They'll coordinate with our external accounting firm. How soon can you be available to support? I'm available now. Good, they'll be on site Monday morning. Quiet rollout, no advance notice to operational leadership. Jake, I need you to understand something. Tyler will likely figure out this came from you. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Tyler's threat the day before, about my family's financial situation, about the choice between doing right and playing safe. I'm prepared. That gave me 4 days to act normal while knowing I'd just lit a fuse on a federal investigation. Tyler, meanwhile, was getting desperate. On Thursday, he announced another policy optimization that would eliminate monthly vendor reviews entirely. But this time, he seemed rushed, almost panicked. He kept checking his phone during meetings, kept asking IT about backup procedures and data retention policies. Friday morning, Tyler made his biggest mistake yet. I was in the break room getting coffee when I overheard him on a phone call in the adjacent hallway. No, we need to move faster, he was saying. The old processes are creating too much documentation. Can you set up the new accounts by Monday? I stayed perfectly still, listening. I don't care about the fees. Just make sure the routing doesn't trace back to the original structure. When I heard his footsteps moving away, I realized Tyler wasn't just stealing money. He was actively trying to cover his tracks, which meant he suspected someone was onto him. Friday afternoon, he called me into his office. His usual smugness was gone, replaced by something that looked like barely controlled panic. Jake, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. That early retirement package? I think we should accelerate the timeline. Maybe we can have something finalized by the end of next week. That seems rushed, Tyler. Well, the company's evolving rapidly. We need people who can keep up with the pace of change. His eyes were darting around the room, settling on his computer screen, his phone, anywhere but on me. Sometimes the best thing for everyone is to recognize when it's time to step aside. I'm not ready to step aside. His jaw tightened. Jake, I'm trying to be nice about this. But if you force my hand, I can find other ways to address performance issues. There it was, the direct threat. No more corporate speak, no more polite suggestion. He was telling me to disappear or he'd make me disappear. I went home that night and told Lisa everything. About Tom's discovery, about the federal investigation, about Tyler's desperation. She listened without interrupting, but I could see her teacher instincts kicking in. She'd dealt with corrupt administrators before. He's scared, she said. When people are cornered, they make mistakes. But they also get dangerous. How dangerous? Depends how much he has to lose. And how much he thinks you know. Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Monday morning, about federal agents walking into our office, about Tyler's reaction when he realized his world was collapsing. In Iraq, the most dangerous moment wasn't when you were fighting the enemy. It was when the enemy realized he was trapped. Monday morning arrived like a court date. I was in the office by 7, drinking coffee and trying to look normal while knowing that somewhere in the parking lot, federal agents were probably reviewing their approach plan. Tyler showed up at 8:15, but something was different. His usual green smoothie was nowhere to be seen. His hands were shaking slightly as he swiped his key card. He looked like a man who'd been up all night deleting files. At 8:45, Rebecca walked through the main entrance with 3 people in dark suits. No briefcases this time. They carried digital tablets and had the focused look of people executing a search warrant. Tyler was in his office, probably watching through his window as they approached. I saw him stand up, straighten his jacket, put on that fake conference room smile. But even from across the floor, I could see the sweat stains forming under his arms. Rebecca knocked on his door. He opened it, smiled, gestured for them to come in. The smile lasted about 10 seconds. Then I heard him say, loudly enough to carry across the office, "I want my lawyer." The blinds in his office snapped shut, but it was too late. Everyone on the floor had heard those 4 words. In corporate America, there's only one reason someone asks for a lawyer during a business meeting. They know they're caught, The silence in that conference room was deafening. Tyler sat there staring at the timeline like it was written in a foreign language, probably trying to figure out how his brilliant plan to throw me under the bus had just exploded in his face. But the federal agents weren't done. Agent Martinez, the lead investigator, opened her tablet and pulled up bank records. Tyler, can you explain why vendor payments totaling $2.7 million were deposited into personal accounts under your control? Tyler's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Account number ending in 4847 registered to T. Brooks Industries, LLC, a company you incorporated 3 months ago in Nevada. She slid a printout across the table. Ring any bells? That's when I realized this was bigger than I'd thought. Way bigger. Tyler hadn't just been skimming vendor payments. He'd created an entire network of shell companies to funnel money through. Agent Martinez continued. We've identified 14 separate vendor identities, all traced back to accounts you control. Conservative estimate puts the total theft at $6.8 million over the past 8 months. Tyler tried to stand up, probably thinking he could still charm his way out of this mess. Look, this is all a misunderstanding. Jake's been resistant to our modernization efforts, and I think he's... Sit down. Agent Martinez's voice cut through the room like a blade. Mr. Brooks, you're under federal investigation for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit theft. I suggest you remain silent until your attorney arrives. Our CEO walked into the room at that moment, followed by our chief legal officer and someone I didn't recognize. Expensive suit, briefcase, the kind of lawyer companies call when they're trying to avoid federal prison. Tyler, the CEO said, his voice cold as winter, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out once the federal agents are finished with their questions. Tyler's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You can't do this. I have a contract. I have rights. The company lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Actually, your contract has a morality clause. Theft from the company voids all employment agreements, including severance and non-compete provisions. But the real surprise came next. Agent Martinez looked at Tyler and said, We're also investigating your accomplice. Someone in accounting helped set up the shell company bank accounts and process the fraudulent invoices. My stomach dropped. Tom Rodriguez had been helping me investigate Tyler. But what if Tom was involved from the beginning? What if I'd been played by both sides? We arrested Patricia Williams from your accounting department this morning, Agent Martinez continued. She's already cooperating with our investigation. Patricia Williams. I barely knew her. She worked in accounts payable, processed vendor payments. But she'd been the one actually executing Tyler's scheme while Tom had been trying to expose it. Tyler's face went through about 6 different expressions before settling on pure panic. His accomplice had already flipped, which meant any hope of denying involvement was gone. I want my lawyer, he said quietly. He's on his way, Agent Martinez replied. But Tyler, you should know that Patricia has provided us with detailed records of your communications. Text messages, emails, even recorded phone calls. She was smart enough to document everything. 20 minutes later, Tyler was escorted out by federal agents. No farewell speech, no handshake, no box of personal items. Just handcuffs and a slow walk through the office while everyone pretended not to stare. The guy who'd been running the show that morning was in federal custody by lunch. Rebecca called me into her office that afternoon. Jake, the FBI wants you to testify before the grand jury next month. They're building a case for federal prosecution, and your documentation was crucial in establishing the timeline. Of course, whatever they need. There's something else. The board met this morning. We're creating a new position, Chief Compliance Officer. It comes with a 40% salary increase and oversight of all risk management functions across the company. The number she mentioned was more than I'd made in my best year ever. Enough to cover Amy's remaining college years without stress. Enough to get Ryan through MIT if that's where he wanted to go. Enough to start thinking about retirement without panic. The board also approved a whistleblower bonus, she continued. Standard practice when employee action prevents significant financial loss. It's a separate payment, not part of your salary. The bonus number made my eyes water. 6 figures. Enough to pay off our mortgage and still have money left over. That evening, I drove home with a head full of thoughts about federal trials and new responsibilities. But mostly I was thinking about how to tell my family that our money worries were over. Lisa was grading papers at the kitchen table when I walked in. Amy was home for the weekend, and Ryan was working on college applications. So, Lisa said, looking up from a stack of algebra tests, how was your day? Tyler got arrested by the FBI. I got promoted to Chief Compliance Officer. and we just became financially secure. Amy looked up from her laptop. Wait, what? I explained the whole thing. The federal investigation, Tyler's arrest, Patricia Williams flipping on him, the promotion, the bonus. Amy kept interrupting with questions about the legal process. Ryan wanted to know if this meant he could apply to expensive schools without guilt. You can apply anywhere you want, I told him. Money's not a factor anymore. Lisa just smiled. I told you the cost of doing the wrong thing is always higher in the long run. 6 months later, I was speaking at the National Association of Corporate Compliance Officers annual conference in Denver. The speech was about early warning signs of internal fraud, but the real message was about trusting your instincts when something doesn't smell right. After my presentation, a woman about my age approached me. I work for a tech startup in Austin. My new CFO keeps talking about optimizing legacy controls. After hearing your talk, I'm thinking I should start documenting some things. Trust your gut, I told her. And remember, they don't call it compliance for nothing. Tyler got 5 years in federal prison plus full restitution. Patricia Williams got 2 years and had to pay back her share. The company recovered most of the stolen money through insurance and asset forfeiture. Me, I'm still here, still keeping companies honest, still believing that experience and integrity matter more than buzzwords and business school theories. I've got a team of 8 now, all of them trained to spot the Tyler Brookses of the world before they can do real damage. Last week, a young analyst fresh out of college flagged something unusual in our vendor payments. Turned out to be a data entry error, nothing criminal, but she caught it before it became a problem. Did I do the right thing? She asked. Always flag the weird stuff, I told her. Better to be cautious than sorry, because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Pay attention, document what we see, and speak up when something's wrong. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest work. And in a world full of Tyler Brookses, honest work matters more than ever.